Hello again, guys. Trump's the president. I laugh every time I think about it or say it, even though I voted for him. Just because, no matter how you look at it, it's totally different than what we've been used to growing up, if you're my age, or even younger, or maybe even a little bit older. I mean, because if you think about it, since the 80s, we've had either Bushes or Clintons, except Obama, but that was basically Hillary Clinton and whatever, or Bill Clinton, whatever, they would have done at that time. I'm sure it's similar. They both supported each other equally. It's totally different. You got a guy who's been on TV, things that you enjoy in your free time. You know, often we look at things that we like, movies and comedy and stuff. We take that a little more serious than politics, or at least I did for a while, because they gave slightly different points of views on how what was perceived as most people think and talk about. But it seems surreal that someone that comes from that is now the president. And I'm happy about it. I I think it's obviously the better choice. It wasn't necessarily a lesser of two evils, in my opinion. There were specific things that I liked about Trump, and I didn't realize that for a while because I supported Bernie early on, and I never went to a Trump rally, but I went to a Bernie Sanders rally, and it, like a lot of his things, like with trade, Bernie talked about NAFTA and the TPP and being against that, and I'm for that, for being against those things, and our different tax loopholes. That was a big thing to me. You know, after trying to think about starting my own type of business and different ways to handle money in order to deal with taxes, because they are a big deal when you're thinking about a business. Like, the majority of us, when we do taxes, we just wait till we get our W-2s and then put it on TurboTax. But if you got a business, there's so much you got to keep track of every day that you're operating. Not that I have to. I'm still in the process of getting mine all completed, but just starting to think of ideas so I knew what to do if once I started growing, like what I would have to, try to learn early, so that if I do my job right and money comes in, I kind of know what to do with it, so I don't get stuck with, you know, audits or something that will mess me up, and there's a lot of ways you got to mitigate cost through, the ways you handle your money, to where it kind of cuts back on taxes and stuff like that. And I'm not too sure where I was going with that, but you got to have an understanding of all the taxes, with Bernie Sanders. And once I started looking at it from a business point of view, I realized that some of his tax ideas weren't necessarily the best idea for the United States, because if the United States is for someone like myself, or someone who, like Donald Trump, I'm not saying I'm like Donald Trump, but I'm saying that has an idea that they want to do something with a business and make their own money and possibly create jobs for other people, it's got to be, the risk can't be too much for that person. And running the figures from like a company that makes 500,000 or $1 million a year, but they have X amount of employees, which means even though they're $1 million company or multi-million-dollar company, from the point of view of people who don't run a business, they'll have to pay so much money in taxes and in labor and everything else, and different depending on what their avenue of their work is, what regulations affect them. There's not much money made. So you have people, if they want to be an entrepreneur, have to work, overtime without getting paid overtime, because that's just the way it is. And looking at, looking back now, kind of the ways like that Bernie Sanders talked about, like all people making over a certain amount of money, like we're talking $250,000 or 300,000 to 500,000 to a million. There wasn't too much of a difference in the way he talked about them. And I understand the majority of the United States, you know, a lot of us are poor, you know, in terms of the numbers. I mean, my wife and I, both working, are considered poor, and at times we really feel poor. But I'm trying to learn, and we're doing what we can together to figure out what we got to do to get out of it, to pursue what we want to do with our life, and to see how to do that. You kind of start having to learn new things that you would have never looked at. And so as I started learning, I didn't like certain tax ideas. And then looking at Trump's, I was like, that makes a bit more sense from a business point of view. And if we really do want to get people out of welfare and getting good jobs, it can't always be just working for someone else. But at the same time, half the time the majority of the time it is going to be someone getting a better job is going to be working for someone else who started a company. Now, if we don't have people able to start companies to hire people and have them pay taxes and be employed, then where are these jobs that are supposed to be paying $15 an hour going to come from? Or where are these jobs that are going to be, you know, worth more money going to come from? And if it's not the people, it's the government. And the government's not there to make jobs, like our government at least. Our government and our representatives are there to represent us and make sure that our constitutional rights aren't infringed upon. It's not about making sure that commerce is good and, you know, between, you know, inside the states. Honestly, like the Commerce Clause back in the day used to just be, and this used to be how the federal government would conduct itself. And the federal government, in terms of commerce, as per the Commerce Clause, only dealt with commerce between states and international commerce, like different business dealings and the such. So like if you were at a business in the state and you didn't sell anything outside of your state, and it was just, you're just a local company, a local business, the federal government doesn't do anything. It's up to the state and the local governments to decide on, you know, what regulations they should have on people, you know, and then all that money, if there is regulations, goes straight to the community. And to me, even now, that makes a whole lot more sense. But different court cases have come in to play over the years, over the last 150 years, that really changed the language, the understanding of what commerce means. And it's been changed all the way to the point where it's invoked to not allow people to collect like rainwater or something crazy like that. You know, if it has an impact now, it's basically, if anything a citizen of the United States is doing affects any commerce of any kind, because it affects the international community, even if you're doing something small in your community, because you're taking away a business from somewhere else, you can be prosecuted. Not prosecuted, but you prosecuted basically and be forced to stop. So I don't like, you know, after learning and trying to learn as much as I can so far about, you know, doing business, there was a lot of things I didn't like about Bernie, but once he got, you know, defeated in the primaries, that opened my eyes a lot more to things I already kind of knew about with WikiLeaks and whatnot. Because I remember hearing about it through like the videos that went around, from what the Chelsea Manning stuff came from. Like there was a video of, you know, it was just released that he hacked out this stuff, and it was a video of soldiers killing, I can't remember if it was in Iraq or not, but, you know, and it shocked everybody, and there were some other things. But it got it out in the open for me to really look at, because there was a ton of leaks going on. Everybody knows about all the alleged hacking, which if you just looked into it, you'd realize it's not even hacking. How the DNC leaks got out and everything. The dude got caught in a phishing email. Like, the Prince of Nigeria sent him an email and he opened it. It wasn't the Prince of Nigeria, but it was some kind of phishing scheme, and that's basically the same thing. and it turned out they were sharing each other's password over the emails, and they were, his password was P A as an at, like your email, SSW0RD, like his password. Like that's what you get stock, and then they tell you to change it. So it's like, to me, I've been on a computer a lot, and I've been, somewhat savvy when it comes to computers. So when I read that, it sounds ridiculous to me that they're calling that hacking, and that's flying into people, like into their ears, and they hear that, and then it's like it makes sense to them. But to me, I'm like, that's not how it happens. Like that's not the case. And there was some real insidious things, like undermining Bernie Sanders. So like this guy he backed out and then supported Hillary. But then the emails come out and say that they're trying to undermine him all the same time. Now, politics are a lot complicated than we think, but we often look at it like it's a TV show because that's the only way we interact with it. Like, I guarantee most of the people who went to a Bernie Sanders rally this year, just like myself, it was the first time they ever went to one. So it's like most of the time all we do is see it on TV, so it has really no effect. But this time around, it's like, don't you see this guy? This is serious. Like, he is talking to these people, and then saying he doesn't support Hillary, and he's running against her and against, like it was coming out at the time of all about her Wall Street speeches and whatnot, and he was wanting to know what was in it. And when it came out, there was a lot of bad stuff in it, but it was already past things, so no one really looked at it. But something had to have happened, or he was either one, he didn't mind reneging on everything that he was standing for throughout his campaign in support of Hillary, or he had to. And either way is scary. Either he had to do it or he chose to do it. Because you can try to support Hillary, and it was all. Then at that point, if it was his choice because he wanted to stop Trump to support Hillary, then that is a lesser of two evil vote. And that's exactly what they were trying to go for the whole time. But then they say, like, that's not how you should vote. So it got me thinking. So I went to the Trump website because I was a person, there's certain things I still respect. And Bernie Sanders being kind of open on gun control, not as hard pressed about it as Hillary, that was one of the things that kind of kept me with him too, because I grew up in the city and in the country at multiple different times, and I've been around guns both in the city when they're pointed at my face and out in the country when I am shooting them with my dad or with my relatives or something. I see nothing wrong with American citizens owning weapons, owning guns. I would go as far as assault rifles. I want to be able to protect myself against what's out there. And if we have, because it's our right, like I don't have to justify it. In order for you to say that I shouldn't be able to, you're guaranteeing my protection of some other way outside myself. Through what? I have every right to self-preservation, It's like you can't take that away. Yes, we've regulated it. And I don't necessarily agree with all of them on certain things. We try to justify a lot of this gun control stuff, like with bad data. Like, if it was a scientific discussion, the idea that the statistics that are used to enforce gun control on assault weapons are the amount of deaths being had by guns, but a high 90-ish percentage of them are done by handguns, yet the legislation is being done to a gun not even involved with the majority of weapons, but yet they state the largest number. If that was being used in a scientific discussion, that would be dismissed as a straw man argument. So I just don't. Seeing that kind of stuff happen is just like, it's mind-boggling to me, because so many times they do that. They say they're on the side of rationality, and and skepticism and scientific method and belief, but they don't always use it. They often, the emotional aspect of it is used as the fulcrum of the argument to change it where it needs to be, because people don't want to feel bad for being against it. Like, yeah, there is a lot of gun deaths in certain areas and with certain weapons, but they're not assault rifles. Do the big ones that get publicized on TV when it's like a school shooting or some terrible mass mass shooting, it is terrible, but that is this, saying it's rare is not undermining the intensity and the problem of that it is. But if you're going to use gun statistics, you can't say that it would stop them all. Like, you just can't say that, and you can't guarantee anybody's protection at all times. So for them to want something to protect themselves is just a basic human right. I mean, evolution has brought us to the point where we've created weapons. If we're not allowed to have one, we're at an evolutionary disadvantage, being forced upon us by other humans who have that advantage of people around them at all times with weapons. So you can't justify that to any rational human being at all. So Bernie being a little softer on that was a little better for me, because I like to keep things at least in the conversation while we have them, because as soon as it's out of conversation, whether guns should be allowed to be had or whether it's normal, you lose it. So I started looking at Trump, and this was after reading a lot of philosophy and in the process and stuff. It really got me open to looking at things from multiple perspectives. So I really started looking at, a geopolitical type of view of it. And, even though we're not a Christian nation, I started seeing who were the only other Christian nations out there and what were their populations as compared to other religions. And really, there's not many. Russia just recently, recently speaking, became, instead of the atheist state of the Soviet Russia, of the Soviet Union, they became Orthodox Christianity for their religion, and they accepted it pretty wholeheartedly. So they're one nation that's a Christian nation, and they're white. And then you got a lot of, Great Britain has, their state religion basically is Christianity. But they're small. They're not really that big in population compared to all the other countries in the world. And same with a few of the other European nations, A lot of Latin areas are Christian. But that's, another, people look at everything as a minority or white. So it's like they're a minority Christian nation, so that's almost allowed. But there's not many, I guess you'd say, European or white Christian nations, and the United States doesn't have a state religion, so you can't really say on paper that it's a Christian nation. But being that it is predominantly Christian from the point of view of other people, outside of the semantics of our own government, we are a Christian nation, no matter how you want to look at it. So if you're thinking that, these nations in the Middle East aren't looking at every American here as part of the white Christian, not white Christian, but been watching too many SJW videos, that we're not a Christian nation, you're kind of mistaken. We are what we're perceived to be by our enemies and by our friends. And that's all the way down to us as individuals, So I started looking at it from that point of view, and Trump was more like, he wasn't hardcore, religious. And that doesn't necessarily bother me too much right now, but sometimes some of the hardcore religious stick on things that really don't matter, in the long run. Like in terms of the true and truly important things that affect everybody and even our allies, So Trump was he was straightforward about the things that did matter to me. and the real problems that we do deal with our enemies and with people who, like, places like the Soviet Union and Germany, Nazi Germany, happened at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, so there was some strong forces in this world that brought forth that type of communism, that type of control, that no one could do anything. Everything was run by the government. And that's often installed in other countries because it works to control the people and maintain power for certain people so they can survive. I mean, kings and queens and lineages don't stay that way on accident. You know, you grow it up. Just like Trump got $1 million loan from his dad. You know, what do you think kings and queens and princes get? You know, why do you think people try to gain this power over countries? So that they can prolong their life. It's almost evolutionary if you look at it in a certain way. And you have to be aware of the issues that infringe upon your safety and freedom as a human being. And I looked at a lot of things like that with Donald Trump. And he shared a lot of the things that I liked about Bernie Sanders. You know, I kind of was veering off of my idea of thinking socialism could be okay if it was democratic, and I was like, no, I'd rather not even get to that point, because once you give government control, it's not going to want to give it back. You know, and even in this case with Trump, I try to, you know, I have to look at it that way too. You know, there's certain things I don't like, but we have to keep, this was like an election to keep things in the conversation. And we have to keep it in the conversation, all these different things, because there's millions of Americans that don't live in the city, that live a totally different way of life than someone who lives in the city. And and that's how this country was founded. So they have deep roots in that. This country was founded by a bunch of people who had to survive winters and move out into the wilderness and live around the countryside and hunt and provide for themselves, because there was no government, and they had to eventually think about things enough living together and form a government. And you got people, including myself, who like that idea of having that kind of freedom still. And there's millions of us. And all Americans need to remember that, and you can't forget it, because we don't forget, you know, I don't forget about all my friends in the city that have to deal with things that are rough and are pretty messed up. But we can't keep trying to keep the same stuff that we've always done happening, because sometimes the consequences are worse. You know, you have to really think about your family and stuff. You got to think about what you want. If you want your city to be better, you got to try to make it better every day. If you see someone messing up stuff, if you got friends, you try to help them. If he's got a dream of becoming successful, what can you do to help him do that? Even if you're not sure it'll happen, why not believe in it with him? You know, yeah, it can happen, man. If you got an idea to help him out, you help him out. You know, because if everyone starts to be striving for success and a better life around you, then it's only going to get better. If only in your perception of it. Things don't end up better all the time. We all end up losing people in our lives, and problems come and go, and accidents happen. But if you're always trying to strive to be better, it's going to be better. So, like, even if you didn't support Trump, you can always strive to do your best individually in your own life. He's not going to hold you back. No one is. Hillary wasn't going to hold me back if she became president. I'd still be trying to do everything I'm trying to do with my life, because I got a family and I got things to leave to them, and lessons that I hope they can learn, that I've learned at an earlier rate, so that when they have sons and daughters, they can teach them even quicker, and we can become a family where the name is a respected name and part of this evolutionary chain of life, that carries on and has carried on for who knows how many years. There's a lineage that we leave that we don't care about anymore. And that's why our families fall apart, and that's why our cities fall apart, and that's why we rely on Big Brother. But thanks for listening to the rant today, guys. Let's try to make America great again.